Hey everybody, Plushie here, and today I just wanted to make a very casual sort of revisit to one of the older hot take videos I made on Archer Baobhan Sith, since she got a very significant MP upgrade recently on JP, and seeing how she's also on Raid Up during the Tamlim Cup event that is going on right now on NA, I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to make a video on that. So without further ado, let's get into today's hot take revisit. And before we actually look at her buff, I will very briefly go through her base stats and her skill set just as a reminder. So of course Baobhan Sith's base stats are kind of just okay, like her attack stats and HP are just pretty standard. Her base gain is honestly just pretty mediocre. 0.58% per hit on a 3-hit arts card is honestly not bad, especially considering she has 2 arts cards, but on a 4-hit quick card it's a little bit, mediocre, underwhelming, I'd say. Definitely the base gain has been reduced by a bit just because she has 2 quick and 2 arts, which are 4 total MP generation cards, and that's usually how they balance their base MP gain, especially for older characters such as Baobhan Sith. She of course also is chaotic evil, which is very important because it gives her synergy with Dolman, and she's going to be relying on Dolman even more after this recent MP upgrade. And overall it's just kind of okay in terms of base stats. I definitely would have liked it if she had 2 buster cards, but I've said that so many times that you're probably tired of it, and of course with that she'll probably get better base gain as well. That's also another reason why I want her to have 2 buster cards, but overall Quick is just leaning very heavily into dealing damage with buster crits on top of their quick damage, so yeah, would have been better. Baobhan Sith's first skill is a 3-turn 40% quick up, which is really large. It's almost a 3-turn mana burst, and also gives herself a 1-turn invul, as well as the entire party, including herself, a 1-hit evade that doesn't expire until they actually get hit, and it has a very tiny demerit of reducing the HP of her party members by 500, which basically is not a demerit, and all of this is only on a 6-turn cooldown. The invul, of course, is a great survival skill for her, and it combos very well with the evade effect because it protects the evade. So essentially during the invul turn, Baobhan Sith cannot have her evade removed, so she can preserve it at least for another turn after the invul turn. And of course the party-wide evade is a very good effect, especially in quick teams that are generally more frail than others, have less access to party-wide hard survival because Scotty Caster's MP is not that easy to get. Baobhan Sith's second skill is a 30 MP battery that also has a 1-turn MP and skill seal for all enemies, and her third skill is another 30 MP battery that drains the enemy's HP by 3000 as well as drains them by 1 MP gauge. These 2 skills has very good synergy. The MP seal combo with the MP drain of course greatly reduces the enemy's frequency in terms of using their MP, especially if you're only facing off against 1 enemy. And of course the 230 MP batteries are a very flexible battery spread in terms of building her around farming. You can of course use the battery normally, use both at once to make 60 charge, and combo that with a pen 2, you get a total of 80 charge, and that combos very well with 20% party-wide chargers such as Oberon as well as Taikobo. Especially for Quick this is great because Quick doesn't really have another great party-wide spread charger like Castoria or Korean Dark, who are 30 chargers, so having 60 total MP charge is actually pretty great, considering Taikobo is probably your best option as a spread charger. But also, of course, you can just use them, separately for different waves. You can use the 30 battery combo with a pen 2 and another 50 MP starting charge CE or Scotty just to MP for 1 turn, and use the 30 MP battery for a following turn. This also makes her challenge quests, MP spamming a little bit easier despite her mediocre MP gains. And finally, the skill seal, I know it's a bit controversial, I like it, I think it's a positive effect. Yes, it does make the enemy attack you more rather than using a useless skill, but nowadays enemies don't really have useless skills anymore. Like, obviously, the very devastating buff removal skills or invul pierce skills still exist, but also we have crazy stuff such as Barguest skill 2, where it allows her to buff remove you every time she attacks for a whopping 3 turns. So you would much rather her just to not use that and hit you once, for example. I will admit it does kind of have anti-synergy with her skill 1 because you don't really want the enemy to attack too much to deplete the evade, but that's just how it works. I don't think it's that big of an issue. She also has just a really simple but solid set of passives. She has Magic Resistance EX, which is 25% debuff resistance. It's great if you can boost it further with certain supports like Rhaenys and Asclepius, and also just great on a baseline level because you definitely have the chance to dodge like a major debuff like an MP seal, skill seal, or even stun. So it's really good in a pinch, even though it's not that reliable. She also has passive 10% quick and arts up, which, you know, boosts her damage, boosts her MP damage, boosts her card gain, which is pretty mediocre, so it's also really nice to have. And finally, her MP was the thing that got buffed, because back in the day, it was really lame. Like, you know, that's generally the problem with dot-based servants, is that so many of their MP effects are dedicated to one very niche playstyle. Like, her overcharge is Evil Curse, which only really works in dot teams, and then her base effect on her MP is also applying a layer of curse, which also, of course, only works well in dot teams. The only real effect of the MP back in the day was really just the sure hit, but after the upgrade, this became an insanely strong MP. The base damage increase, of course, is the most important part of any MP upgrade, which is also why they're usually good regardless of what additional effects they give to it, but the additional effect they gave to Baobhan Sith was actually very solid. They basically gave her a, you know, Count of Monte Cristo slash Locusta style anti-dot damage. So it's essentially universal unless the enemy has debuff immune, and it scales with how many curse stacks the enemy has on themselves. And it's 10% per stack, and it can stack up to 10 stacks. So the maximum amount of anti-trait damage that Baobhan Sith can do with her MP is 200%, which is higher than a standard anti-trait, which usually lands at 150%. And they also did another thing, which is move the curse to happen before damage, which is actually quite important, because then the MP on a baseline level, even if you don't, you know, add any bonus curses to the enemy, will scale at 10% extra damage with anti-trait, because the curse obviously lands first on the enemy before the MP does damage, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 10% special effective damage, which is calculated after all the other damage is tallied, and then you get 10% of the total damage. So it's actually really significant if you're buffing your DPS with a bunch of different 5-star supports. So in order to show you how good her damage is, I'm once again going to be using Rat's damage sheet. This is probably the most familiar sheet to a lot of people when talking about damage, and of course it's not the most reflective of actual performance, because this is not considering any CEs, not considering any supports, and it also counts 1-turn buffs. So there has to be a little bit of nuance when looking at the list without just, you know, looking at it on baseline level, but still I think this is the most fair list in terms of comparing damage, especially if we're just looking at relative damage within the same class. I think it's really, really good as a tool. So as you can see here, Baobhan Sith's damage, of course, goes crazy. She is essentially the hardest hitting single target archer that only loses to Ptolemy at MP5, because as we all know, MP upgrades scales worse at higher MP levels. If you're a little bit confused, I can explain it in the pinned comments. Just ask me in the comment section, I guess. But yeah, her damage, this is also considering just one layer of curse, because Baobhan Sith doesn't have any other ability of applying curse onto the enemy in a vacuum if we only look at her skill set. So yeah, you know, this is really good damage, obviously. It's very close to someone like Emiya Alter, because he also has an upgraded MP, but the difference here is that Emiya Alter's damage is only going to get lower as the time goes on, because he has 3 attack-based buffs. So, like, his attack up is going to be gone if he uses 3 attacks. His arts up is going to be gone after he uses 3 arts attacks. So overall, you know, the damage is going to be dropping off, but Baobhan Sith's damage actually is going to be ramping up, because of course all of her buffs are 3-turn, and she's going to be applying more curse as time goes on. So this is a really good damage, like if we look at this damage compared to some of the welfares, because I do think it's also important for these sort of quote-unquote pay-to-win characters to beat out welfares at low MP levels, because otherwise why would you use a paid character if you can just use the freebie? And Baobhan Sith very much achieves that, because her two biggest competition in the welfare categories are going to be Saika and Kuro. And compared to Saika, MP2 Baobhan Sith very confidently beats her MP5 damage, and when compared to Kuro, it's even more tragic. MP1 Baobhan Sith does pretty confidently beat Kuro's damage. And of course, Kuro's damage is also counting her one-turn rainbow buff activation, so, after that runs out, it's going to be even worse damage. Obviously, I'm not saying that, Baobhan Sith is just straight up better than Kuro, even though I do believe that is the case. I know there are some nuances in that argument, but like, once again, if you are just looking for an archer to kill saber bosses or to farm like a big single target brute, which is usually what people look for in welfares anyways, Baobhan Sith, even just at MP2, can very confidently outcompete these welfares, which is, once again, very important in my opinion. Since the sheet is made with specifically one curse layer in mind, I took the numbers and I tweaked them a little bit to correspond to different amounts of curse stacks on the enemy, and then how much damage Baobhan Sith would be doing, just using her own buff still. So as you can see here, at 0 curses, because it is an upgraded MP, the damage is still not too bad compared to some other single target archers, but obviously, debuff immunity or high debuff resist would be her greatest counter. And at 2 curses, which is extremely easy to achieve, you just have to MP 2 turns consecutively, and the second MP would be at 2 curses. That's already beating essentially every single target archer without any traits, so that's obviously very, very good. At 3 curses, which is quite easy to achieve if you support her with Doman, especially in a challenge quest, both Doman's first and third skill gives an additional layer of curse, so you can immediately start with 3 curses. Her damage is already, approaching characters that has anti-trait, right? So if we take a look at Fujino here, as well as Chiron, both have upgraded MPs that also has anti-traits, the damage is very close to what they are doing. And of course, at 4 curses, which is still pretty easy to achieve, you can just use Dolman's MP before Baobhan Sith's MP to apply that 1 extra layer of curse. She is beating these upgraded MPs with anti-traits, and once again, another great comparison here is going to be Ashwataman at 1 HP, because his scaling is like Hijikata. Being at 1 HP is really good scaling, but as you can see here, because of the upgraded MP effect, Baobhan Sith with 4 stacks of curse is still able to beat him. And finally, I only ended the list here at 5 curses because it is quite unrealistic to expect her to, go all the way up to 10 curses, even in a challenge quest in a lot of the cases. So I'm just going to list out until 5 curses because 50% is the standard amount of extra damage you'll be doing against anti-trait, and of course her damage is extremely impressive, and you can see here not a lot of archers on this list is able to compete, other than some very specific ones, such as Orion against males, who has a 1-turn 100% anti-male power mod and all that. So this is obviously just really high tier damage, and 5 curses is not too unreasonable to achieve in a challenge quest if you're not switching targets. Now, would I say this is arguably one of the best MP upgrades ever made? Honestly, yeah. But there are still a couple of glaring weaknesses that prevent her from being absolutely insane. So first of all, in farming, I already talked about all the pros, such as her having 60 MP charge and working very well with 20% spread chargers, and of course her generally high damage. But it's very hard to get the curse stacks high in a farming scenario. Usually you will be stuck at 1 curse, and even if you particularly pair her with someone like Dolman, Dolman's 80 battery does have a curse on it, so if you are forced to use Dolman's MP early, you can't really save that curse for the 1 big damage turn that you want to use with Baobhan Sith. And also, if you want to MP multiple turns with Baobhan Sith, then at least one of the turns will probably only yield you with 1 curse. And once again, even with particular synergy, I'd say it's more realistic to expect her to hit like 2 curses. And that would not be able to, compete with a upgraded MP that also has anti-trait. Like, once again, 2 curses versus characters like Fujino or Chiron, the damage is not that close, unfortunately. And of course, I think Baobhan Sith is more so a boss killer character because it is a lot easier to accumulate curse stacks on the boss, and her damage does grow exponentially. But on that front, there are also a couple of issues. First of all, it's the issue that plagues all sorts of characters that have this type of MP, which is their inconsistent damage. Not just that you have to rely on face cards to apply the special dot damage in order to do more with your MP, it's also very easily countered by characters with relatively high magic resist, because instead of just having to land one single debuff like someone such as Summer Eris to do 50% extra damage, you have to continuously land these debuffs by using your face cards or using your MP or whatever, and along the way it is very easy for one or two of them to get blocked off by the enemy. So let's say you go for a standard sequence of MP card, Brave Chain, so you have 3 curse stacks on the enemy, and by the second MP you're about to use, the MP applies the curse before damage, so the second MP would be at 40% extra damage. But if you're fighting against someone with magic resist A or EX, then you might miss 1 to 2 curses within that sequence, and that would drop the damage from 40% just to 20% extra, which is quite a big fluctuation as we see here on this chart. And this is not even considering any other additional buffers, like the damage is going to fluctuate even more if you're buffing your DPS with a bunch of damage boosts. So it is quite inconsistent damage. And my final issue with this MP upgrade is that characters with this type of MP are usually designed around this gimmick. If we take a look at Count of Monte Cristo and Locusta, they both have a skill that allows them to apply poison or burn on the enemy whenever they attack without the help of command codes. The great thing about this is, one, you have better flexibility if you really need like a utility command code such as the stun immune command code, then you can equip that instead of a dot applying command code. But more importantly, if you do load your entire deck with those debuff command codes, your ramp up is really fast. As I mentioned a bit earlier, it's really unrealistic for Baobhan Sith to reach 10 curse stacks on the enemy, even in a challenge quest scenario. However, that is not the case with characters such as Monte Cristo or Locusta, because they can just double dip. They can stack 2 stacks whenever they attack with their cards, with both the skill active as well as the command code, rather than the 1 stack that Baobhan Sith is forced to do, or sometimes even 0 stacks if you're forced to equip other, special utility command code. The saving grace is, of course, the MP itself is upgraded, so it already has really high baseline damage that you don't really need that many curse stacks in order to reach very high MP damage in general. To wrap up this video, I will say Baobhan Sith is definitely worth the investment and Saint Courts to roll for, because she has firmly joined that group of 4 stars that outperforms a majority of the 5 stars in their same niche. Baobhan Sith can be pulled for right now during NA's Tamlim Cup raid up for Britomart, but she will be sharing her banner with Saber Barghest, who is also a very cool and interesting character that is story locked. But if you aren't really going for Barghest, you're only going for more Baobhan Siths, I recommend saving your courts until next year's Saber Medusa Tower event, where she will be raided up with Miss Crane, who's also another SSR that is really good to have, especially if you like interesting team building for challenge quests. Or you can also just wait for the event where she gets buffed, which is the Lost Belt 6 Part 2 Recollection quests. And during that, she will be rated up with Morgan instead, and if you want more MP copies of Morgan, you can also just wait until then. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this really random and rambly video. I'll see you guys in the next one.